Hey guys, Enterthestars, and welcome to this Thursday show. I pre-recorded this so that hopefully I could be in the chat with you guys today, because there have been some new developments in terms of the landscape of America and the world for that matter that I wanted to go over with you. Now, this headline right here is not good, but we knew this was all going to happen. Now, if you haven't been up to speed on why this is happening, then you might be very concerned about this. But understand that this was all done by design, that this was not an accident. The serpent had his hooks and claws into the Christian religion of America going back to the 1970s. It actually went further back than that, but in the 1970s, there was what was called a 501c3 tax-exempt status. And when that was given to these churches, laws were put in place that forbid churches from speaking against anything that is lawful, and that would include mandates, under threat of losing that exempt status, which would put most of these Christian denominations out of business. You can't pay for things if you're not tax exempt. So this is the history of all this, and over the years, the government has slowly tightened the screws on what can and cannot be said. And under the Trump administration, they did begin to loosen that, but for one purpose and one purpose only, and that was to weaponize the Christian religion to help Trump get elected. And they allowed money back in the temple at that point to where different, people that were running for office and things could basically pour money into these churches to get their votes. And this goes both ways. It isn't just the Republicans doing this. Democrats are doing it as well, and can do it as these restrictions were lightened. So this is kind of the history, and this was all done by design to bring down the church. Now, it's not to say that people in the church are bad. It's the organization of the church and how it was set up to basically fail over the years. And this is why, if you were to go into one of these big box churches and, for instance, present some of the things that we found on this channel, they would immediately discredit it. They would say, you're digging too deep. Don't look into those things. And there's a reason for that, because they've been neutered and they're not allowed to talk about these things and expose governments. So instead of calling a spade, they simply say, that's not of, what we're all here supposed to be doing. So that's what's going on with this. Now let's read this. The decline of American Christianity is continuing apace. Pew Research Center reports today that the number of self-identified Christians has declined by 12% since 2012. Now, this is unbelievable. Now, we knew this was going to happen because all of this is a system of control and a system of destruction, right? You build it and then you destroy it. These are the tenets of the Freemasons. This is what they do. They build things and then they destroy them. And so in this case, we have the entity of religious doctrine in America that was designed to fail. And so they're doing their job. This is exactly what they were designed to do, to slowly erode people's faith, because people feel like their faith is attached to these religious entities, even though the Bible does not say that that's supposed to be the case. You're not supposed to identify with a building and a religion and all these things. You're supposed to identify with Christ in the Bible, which has nothing to do with the building. After all, he was a carpenter, but didn't build a church, did he? And I think that was the entire point of him coming as a carpenter, was to show us that churches don't exist in buildings. Churches exist within us and between us as human beings. Where one or more is present, so is the Lord as well. So we also have, of course, all of the programming that's been going on over the last several decades in the media to erode the Christian religion, right? And to shame us, to make us look silly, stupid. And you notice how even the churches have not given Christians the answers to combat some of this attack by the mainstream. And that was done on purpose as well. They're very simple ways to discuss and defend the Bible and Christ that simply have not been given to Christians to do so. And this is why you guys come to channels like this, because we do give you the tools to combat, all of the lies that they spread about the Most High and His Son. So, their work isn't done yet because Christians are still the dominant cultural group in America. And what they're saying at that point is that they still have more work to do because we're only 63% now. Now, understand that even the attack on white America is part of this agenda as well. This is why they're attacking white America, because the majority of the 63% left that identify as Christians are white. And it goes hand in hand and dovetails in with kind of an identity, so to speak. And so understand that this is why they're coming after white America, because of this. This is a large part of it. Let's keep reading here. It says the secularization of America is a long-term process and has many causes, and the percentage of Christians has been trending downward since Pew first surveyed the issue in 2007. Moreover, not everything in public life over the last decade has been about former President Trump, even if it sometimes feels that way. Still, Trumpism might be both the beneficiary and accelerant of Christianity's loosening grip on the culture. On the one hand, a 2018 study suggested Trump's victory in 2016 was driven by a cohort, white Christian men who feared they were losing their cultural dominance. Well, it had really nothing to do with that. It had to do with losing of freedoms and the concerted effort and attack that was directed at a certain identity. And in defense of that, yes, droves of white men and families came out thinking Trump was going to be the answer, but ultimately he was not the answer. But this was triggered basically by this feeling that they were under attack, which was definitely happening. Okay. So let's keep talking about this here because this is interesting, how they tried to whitewash this. Support for Trump was linked to a belief that high status groups actually face more discrimination than low status groups. Well, they were feeling that way because that's what was kind of happening over the last several decades. As the pendulum swung back the other way and tried to overcompensate for all of the wrongs that were done in the past decades ago. And so we all know that that is not the way to correct a problem. You don't correct an all-white problem with an all-black college. You don't correct an all-white problem with allowing people of simply a different color to do the very same actions in retribution. That's not how you fix a problem like this. That plays into the right-left paradigm. And allowing the pendulum to swing the other way simply allows the silent party to keep control by keeping us divided. So, this is interesting. We're going to have to follow this. Now, don't let your heart be worried. This isn't the end of belief in God. Although the Bible does say that their hearts would grow cold and they would lose love for the faith, there's still many, many of us who love the Lord who don't set foot into a church, except when it's 2 or 3 of us together, right? So, this is the narrow gate that they've been talking about. Now, this next story is troubling, and this is why parents are so upset. This is why parents are going to school board meetings and angry, and understand that this also links into what we just talked about, this concerted effort, this attack on and trying to secularize our children away from God. This is part of it, and this is the reading curriculum. And this particular, I'm going to scroll past that. Texas students, their parents were upset because of this reading assignment that the parents felt was inappropriate. I can't say what they really said, but let's zoom in on this. Book assignment towards 14-year-old Texas students upsets parents. And I'm going to read through this page from this book. This is part of their reading assignment. And I don't think anybody out there would, with a straight face, try to say that this was okay for 14-year-olds to read. I don't even think this is okay for high school students to read. You've got to keep things above the bar when it comes to children. With adults, it's different. But when you're underage, none of this should be filtered through the minds of children. Talking about being wasted. Talking about two guys hooking up. Fooling around. Okay? People getting stoned. I have to change the way we say things around here. But you can see what's on your screen. Fooling around. Right? Getting wasted. Multiple, basically risque behavior. Heck, the most risque thing I think I saw when I was in school, now this was in the 80s and 90s, was like Romeo and Juliet. And even with that, everyone just cringed. Nobody wanted to see that. So here we are, fast forward to 2021, and just things are just going off the rails. The moral degradation of society, just being allowed to even talk about these things in school is just very, very disturbing. Now, we all know what happened with the tornado that destroyed the candle plant. And there's some questions here. Apparently, they weren't allowing these people to go home who wanted to go home. The sirens were going off. This is a very, very sad story. And I shared my thoughts with you on this during yesterday's show when talking about what these tornadoes mean, because many of us had these reoccurring dreams of these tornadoes across the landscape, multiple tornadoes. So this was not normal what happened here. This was not normal at all. And this is a very sad story. And we're praying for the people of Kentucky and other places that were affected by this. Now, let's get into the Greasewell case. Now, people have been following this, and my guess is there will be no prosecution of this woman. But, they're trying to make it look like it might happen. It might not. This is part of the right-left paradigm and keeping everyone on edge. But here's the case that the prosecution has against her. They have contended during her trial in New York City was not an unwilling accomplice, as the defense has argued and will continue to argue. They say now that the government has presented its case, and the four women she's accused of as minors, mostly in the 90s, have told their stories. So the prosecution has rested its case. It's the defense's turn now, which is probably going on as we speak. And, when I looked at these witnesses, I was like, these are kind of lame witnesses. Like, they could have come up with better witnesses than this, right? I mean, these people didn't have the best track record for telling the truth. Some of them, many of them ended up working in the adult industry after that. So, what was really going on here, right? And so, I don't know. Is this whole thing just a fake trial to make it look like they went after her, but they couldn't prove that she met the definition of traffic? Because that's what they're prosecuting her on, is traffic. Not being with underage children. It's traffic. And that's kind of hard to prove. You really have to have dozens of witnesses, don't you? That all say the same thing. And you might throw out half of those as being insincere, but to only have 4 witnesses, that just is a little bit suspect to me. So we'll see what happens, but this almost seems like a straw man, trial, in my opinion. So she was there. She was involved in some of the things, but they're trying to say that she was a victim herself. So I guess we'll have to see. Now, this was from a couple days ago, and this is just hilarious. Like, really? They're going to call up 35 witnesses to basically vouch for Greasewell? But here's the problem. They don't want to tell the witnesses names, identities, nothing. And I'm sure that the court would forbid their identities from being leaked out. So in essence, these are nothing people. The public doesn't get to see who these people are, who would actually put their name on the line to vouch for this woman. I would like to see the names of these people, because that would say a lot, because they're not just going to pull out random people. These are going to be pretty high profile people. Otherwise, what would be the point? You can't just pull like a waiter out, or, someone that they knew, or, it has to be prominent people that are coming to her defense. Maybe this was just a move. Maybe they knew that the judge would not allow this. But this is what their strategy is. Interesting, right? Now let's move on to this next story, because the Air Force has now taken the first steps to start getting rid of any pilots or anyone in the Air Force who is refusing to get the Vidco Pokemon sticker. 27 discharged so far. I'm thinking this small number is intentional to make it look like, oh, we tried everything we could. But there were just some that just wanted to refuse. Let's read this. Air Force has discharged 27 people for refusing to get Vidco Pokemon sticker, making them what officials believe are the first service members to be removed for disobeying the Pokemon mandate. The Air Force gave its forces until November 2nd to get the Pokemon, and thousands have either refused or sought an exemption. She said all of them were in their first term of enlistment, so they were younger, lower-ranking personnel. Oh, okay, so that's okay. Oh, just get rid of those guys that are brand new, no big deal. So they're sending a message, aren't they? They want you to be scared. It's all about fear. Fear you into getting it, just like what they did with the nurses and essential personnel. Had they waited, they may have been okay, because now courts across the nation are saying that that's unenforceable, that you can't do that. But for the poor people that went ahead and did it and gave into the fear, this is what they're talking about. Now, what's this next story? Oh, the Tennessean. Well, this is weird. The government can hide spy cameras on your land? Are you kidding me? Now, let's read this, because I haven't read this one yet. I just pulled up the headline because I thought it was interesting, and I thought it was something that applied to people like us who have land or want to have land one day and have our privacy. Be out of the grid, out of the matrix. Nobody roams onto Terry Rainwater's land by accident. A locked gate, blocked cars, and no trespassing signs warn uninvited guests to stay off the 136-acre parcel along the Big Sandy River in Camden, west of Nashville. So Rainwaters was surprised in December 2017 when he discovered 2 spy cameras mounted on trees within the boundaries of where he lives, farms, and hunts. Whoever installed the devices even lopped off a branch on one of his trees to get an unobstructed view of his comings and goings. Can you believe this? Now, this plays right into this whole fear scenario that a bunch of white men are going to get together and form their own country or militia or whatever. And there is no threat of that. But the federal government wants everybody to think there is. Okay? They want to connect past events, like the whole Branch Davidian thing. They want to try to connect that to modern day people that just want their privacy. And so we're surveilling this guy. Let's keep reading here. Rainwaters was creeped out. He soon learned that the cameras belonged to the Tennessee Wildlife Resource Agency, which routinely sends officers onto private fields without search warrants to snoop for evidence of game and fish violations. Okay, so you guys have all heard my feelings about game wardens and game and fish, especially on your private land. You should be able to do whatever you want on your private land as long as you're not hurting another person or infringing on their rights. This is just creepy. Now, of course, this is their cover story, that it was these game and fish officers, but who's to say that they're not sharing that intelligence with other agencies who might be concerned about this person? Of course they are, and they have the legal right to do that under the quote-unquote laws. So, this is unbelievable. Let's keep reading here. So this guy fought back with a lawsuit against the trespassing agency. Our public interest law firm, the Institutes of Justice, represents him. This is a nationwide problem. Although the case is proceeding in state court under the authority of Tennessee Constitution, the central claims point to nationwide problems. Starting out about 100 years ago, federal courts began chipping away at the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution, which guarantees the right of people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects. Many local courts have followed along, gutting similar provisions in their state constitutions. Time and again, the U.S. Supreme Court has approved rather than checked these violations, leaving landowners, along with just about everyone else, vulnerable. Now, this is crazy. So now you got to go look through your land to make sure that you're not getting spied on. Now, 136 acres, that's a lot of land. I don't know if I would need that much land or want that much land. But this could happen to anybody. If it can happen on 136 acres, then it can happen on 5 acres, can't it? That's trespassing. Let's keep reading here. The first setbacks came in 1924 during Prohibition, when the Supreme Court held that government agents could hide on private land to see if someone was brewing or selling alcohol. Wow. Now, I thought that the Constitution said that unless they have any probable cause that a crime is occurring, that they can't do this. But apparently that's not the case. It says the so-called third-party doctrine represents another setback. The judge-made law, which the Supreme Court invented in 1976, strips away Fourth Amendment protections for any information that a person voluntarily turns over to third parties. Examples include bank deposits, debit card transactions. Remember, we talked about all this, that your debit card transactions are being shared and sold to entities like Google. So and this is why you get hit back with ads. Like, for instance, if you have a cold or something, you go and buy cough medicine at the store. Well, you notice ads will start showing up on your phone about you having a cold and offering you all kinds of other products. That's because your debit card or bank card transaction shared your personal information. So basically, the government can deem something questionable activity or suspicious activity based on the information that's floating around out there, and they could start investigating you. I mean, this is really turning into China, isn't it? Wow. It says, essentially, anyone who lives in the modern world must waive Fourth Amendment rights. Many business owners also lose protections at work. Code enforcers typically need a warrant to inspect warehouses and backroom areas closed to the public, but the Supreme Court created an exception to the warrant requirement in 1970 for what it calls closely regulated industries. Wow. So that's about all of this I'm going to read. Just know that this can be happening. If you own some land, you might want to do a sweep, see what's going on, and try to defend yourself against this. Violation of privacy. Make them prove in court why they're doing it. Okay? Just because you hear like pop sticks going off on someone's property doesn't mean they're illegally doing anything. They could literally say that anything is illegal activity, and it needs to stop now. Now, this is crazy because it looks like Democrat children are the highest Pokemon stickered children. This is happening right now. The yawning gap between red and blue, while the VidCo was relatively nonpartisan in its impact last year, slower Pokemon uptake among Republicans and conservatives has resulted in significantly increasingly worse outcomes in red areas. Really? Based on what data? I would like to see that data. The campaign to get children Pokemon stickered is following the same pattern. Based on what measures? I would like to see that data. Oh, new data from the Kaiser Family Foundation reinforces that Pokemon stickering for children against VidCo remains even more split along partisan lines than Pokemon stickers for adults. So, children are getting stuck if they're Democrats. Now, here's our last story. And this is understand that this is good cop, bad cop. This whole Facebook thing and pretending like they're defending, free speech. It has everyone thinking they're defending free speech. And then people on the left are like, they should be doing more. This is just good cop, bad cop. Facebook isn't doing one thing to defend your free speech. And let me give you an example. In my Facebook group, one of the subscribers there noticed that our group had been overrun by a lot of new age stuff and stuff that I don't particularly want on there. It's supposed to be a free group that people can share everything, but understand that what can happen is that these entities and people that don't even believe in God will try to attach themselves to groups like mine to discredit the group or to overrun it or to try to get converts. So at that point, some person has to do something. It's like you wouldn't let a Satanist into a church who was telling people to believe in Satan, would you? No. You would probably say, no, you can't come here. If that's your belief system, then you need to go somewhere else, because you're not going to come in here and try to convert people out of the church. Okay, it's like throwing the money out of the temple, or Jesus rebuking the demons that were possessing people and pulling them out of people. It's kind of the same thing, and you have to do that sometimes. Anyway, this particular brother, I made him a moderator, asked him to come on and clean up the group. He seemed legit. He still seems legit, but he got into it with somebody who was of a different identity. Let's just put it that way. And basically was telling them what the Bible said about abominations. And that person reported his comment, and he got knocked off of Facebook, and the group was threatened to be taken down. 5,000 members in the Facebook group, and they threatened to take it down based on one comment by a moderator. It wasn't even that bad of a comment, but apparently you can't judge people anymore. You can't tell people what the Bible says about certain sins. You're not allowed to do that anymore on social media. So, Facebook isn't doing anything. They're just pretending to. Good cop, bad cop. So, nice try, you guys. Anyways, that's about all the headlines I had for you guys today. I love each and every one of you. Have a great day.